Hi guys, welcome to the lesson today on factoring. We're going to do some factoring review before we move on to some new material. Some updates and announcements before we start. Make sure you're submitting your work with the correct teacher. Ms. Lockhart and Ms. McNeely have different links for assignments. All assignments for now can still be submitted. Don't wait too long. Ms. Dorsey is talking about putting a deadline on that. So if you've got some stuff that you're missing from quarter 3 or anything from the e-learning, go back and do that now and help yourself get caught up. Just a reminder that at this point you should be using your Riverside email address. It makes it much easier for me to contact you, and it makes it easier for you to access your materials. If you're not using that email and don't know how, email me and I can help you set that up. Here is an IP announcement. This has been on the last couple of lessons, so I'll just quickly go over it. IP will now be graded for correctness, not completion. Remember, you can always attend office hours and redo any IP that you aren't happy with. All IP will now be worth 10 points in the gradebook. If you get, for example, a 27 out of 35, I'll divide 27 by 35, move the decimal one place to the right and round, and your grade will become a 7.7 out of 10 in the gradebook. I'm doing this so that you can more easily see how you're doing. If you get a 9 or above, that's an A, an 8 to an 8.9 is a B, a 7 to a 7.9 is a C, and anything else below that is an NG and should be redone. Office hours are held Monday through Thursday from 11 to 12. The link can be found at the top of the haiku page. If you need some more one-on-one help, if like the group office hours are too much, just shoot me an email and we'll get together for a private online office hour. Shout out to Kieran Ward for emailing to request a one-on-one office hour so that he can get help with his work. As soon as we got done with the office hour, Kieran went to work and submitted 3 assignments. Nice job, Kieran. What are your struggles or celebrations this week? For the most part, I'm enjoying being at home with my dogs and my husband. I've been reading a lot, playing video games, getting outside as much as possible. My struggle this week is that it has now been 1 month since I've seen any of my family, friends, or students. I miss all of you so much. I know we are doing the right thing, staying home and safe, but it's been difficult. In the struggles and celebrations section of your IP today, tell me, who do you miss most right now? Before we start, some strategies for success. Make sure you're completing the e-learning lessons in order. If you've not yet done previous e-learning assignments, go back and complete those first. Make sure you're watching the video before you complete the assignment. Take notes while you watch the video. If you don't have your paper and pencil out now, go ahead and pause that and get your materials. When the video says to pause and try the problems on your own, do it. You need to practice before you complete the assignment on your own. Unhappy with your grade after you submit your assignment? Email me for help and resubmit for a better grade. Remember, assignments are now graded on correctness, so IDK or leaving blank just gets you a 0. Some students are trying to do the IP without watching the video first. This is not a good idea. To help encourage you to watch the videos for this lesson, I will now be including a code word that I will ask you about on your IP. It will be said out loud, so you must listen and watch the video to find it. Write it down on your note-taking paper so that you have it ready for later. I'll make it real easy for you to find this first time. I'm going to start hiding it in the video, but for today, we'll put it right at the beginning. This weekend, my husband and I decided to have a fire in our fire pit. It was beautiful out. We cooked hot dogs and sat outside with the dogs. So because of that, today's code word will be fire pit. Write it down now and be ready to enter it into the IP. If you spell it wrong, don't worry. I'll check your work. I'm not grading you on spelling, just making sure that you know the word. Right now, pause this video and complete the bell work below. Remember, it's really important to keep practicing those problems so that you don't forget everything while we're gone. I'll go over solutions if you get stuck. For factoring, it's important that you're able to find the magic numbers. So first we want to identify 2 numbers that multiply to be 6 and add to be 5. So if we think about 6, 6 can be 1 times 6, or it can be 2 times 3. 1 and 6 add to be 7, 2 and 3 add to be 5, so your magic numbers are 2 and 3 on that one. For number 2, you should have looked for 2 numbers that multiply to be -8 and add to be 7. So when I think about numbers that multiply to be 8, if I don't worry about my signs, 1 and 8 multiply to be 8, and 2 and 4 multiply to be 8. And I want to think about, is there a way to add or subtract these to make 7? Well, 2 plus 4 would be 6, 2 minus 4 would be -2, so that's not right. It has to be 1 and 8. But in order for those to subtract, one of them must be negative. Since the larger number is supposed to be positive, since 7 is positive, we'll make 1 the negative. So you should have had -1 and 8. For number 3, you want to identify 2 numbers that multiply to be -12 and add to be -1. So if you think about numbers that multiply to be -12, it's 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. And I want to think about, is there any way to add or subtract these to make 1? Well, 3 and 4 could subtract to make -1. So let's think about, since the number is negative, we want our larger number to be negative. So your magic numbers are 3 and -4. And then for number 4, identify the two numbers that multiply to be 15 and add to be -8. So again, we're looking for 1 and 15, 3 and 5, those multiply to be 15, and then I need them to make -8. Well, 1 and 15 is not going to do that. 3 and 5 might. In order for the 15 to be a positive, both of these have to be a negative, so -3 and -5 are my magic numbers. Good job. Okay, factoring review. It's very important that you understand today's lesson before we move forward. If you're not able to factor, you will be unable to complete the next few lessons. Most of the rest of this month's lessons will require some understanding of trinomials and factoring. Let's get started. What is factoring? Factoring is just dividing a number into its smallest pieces. We can factor whole numbers to demonstrate the concept. So let's factor 54. I want to find all the things that multiply together to make 54. Well, if I divide 54 by 2, I get 27. 2 is prime, so I stop there. 27 can't be divided by 2, but it can be divided by 3, so 3 times 9 becomes 27. 3 is prime, but 9 is not. 9 is 3 times 3, so now I know that the factors of 54 are 2 times 3 times 3 times 3. There are 4 factors that multiply together to make 54. Pause the video right now and you try to factor 18. Welcome back. You should have started with 2 times 9 because 18 divided by 2 is 9, and then 9 is 3 times 3. So the factors of 18 are 2 times 3 times 3, and those multiply together to make 18. So let's talk about an application of factoring. Suppose we know that the area of a rectangle is 12. Since we know that the area of a rectangle can be found by multiplying length times the width, we can use factoring to find some possible lengths of the sides. Well, we could have 1 times 12, we could have 2 times 6, or we could have 3 times 4. There must be a way to tell which one of these it should be. Suppose I knew that the area was 12, but the length and the width should add to be 7. That's what I'm doing when I'm finding the magic numbers. I know these have an area of 12. In order to narrow down which one it should be, I should be looking at the one that multiplies to be 7. So my magic numbers here should have been 3 and 4. The process becomes more complicated if I don't have a whole number for the area, but instead have an expression. Suppose I know that the expression for the area of the rectangle is 2x squared plus 3x minus 8x minus 12. I need to find the two factors of the expression. There are already 4 terms. It is not necessary for me to find the magic numbers if I already have 4 terms. I have to have 4 terms to factor. What I can do is go ahead and factor by grouping. So this is 2x squared plus 3x, and that's in the first group. And then I always want to add on the second group and keep the negative on the inside of the parentheses. This will help me not make so many negative errors. What I'm looking for now is a common factor. Well, 2 and 3 are only divisible by 1, but x squared and x are both divisible by 2. 2 divided by 1 is 2, x squared divided by x is x. 3 divided by 1 is 3, x divided by x is just 1, so the x's cancel out. Now, I notice that 8 and 12 are both divisible by 4, but -8 divided by 4 is -2, and -12 divided by 4 is -3. Remember, we mentioned when we started to factor that these two should be the same, and they are not. So in order to fix this, I'm going to turn the 4 into a negative, and that turns both of those into a positive, because a negative divided by a negative is a positive. Now I have my two factors. The 2x plus 3 matches, so that's one of my factors, and the 1x minus 4, or plus -4, is my other factor. What that means is the lengths of my sides here have to be 2x plus 3 and 1x minus 4. And if I knew x, then I could figure out my length and my width. All right, so let's try another one together without the rectangle. Remember, we want to rewrite this so that there's always a plus in the middle of the two groups, that I don't make any negative errors. Now I'm going to factor out the common factor for each group. 3 and 15 are both divisible by 3. X squared and x are both divisible by x. 3x squared divided by 3x is x. 15x divided by 3x is 5x, or excuse me, just 5. For this one, I want to take out the negatives so that I will leave the positive on the inside. -4 divided by -4 is 1, and we bring down the x. -20 divided by -4 is +5. Two parentheses match, so this becomes x plus 5 times 3x minus 4. Go ahead and pause the video and you try number 2 on your own sheet of paper. Go ahead and do that now. Welcome back. You should have started by grouping your first two together, 2x squared plus 3x, and grouping your second two together, -8x minus 12. You should have factored out an x out of the first group, leaving us with 2x plus 3, and you should have factored out a -4 from the second group, so that would be 2x plus 3 as well. And so what you're left with is 2x plus 3 times x minus 4. Remember, if you wrote it like this, x minus 4 times 2x plus 3, either of those answers are correct. They mean exactly the same. Good job. Now, what if we only know that the expression for the area of the rectangle is a trinomial? We still need to factor. We still need to find the lengths of these sides. But now we have to find the magic numbers. So remember, we're identifying A, B, and C. So A is 1, B is 2, and C is -15. A times C is -15, and I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to be -15 and add to be 2. Well, 1 and 15 won't work, but 3 and 5 might. Remember, I want this to be a +2, so the smaller number should be negative. Now, remember, I am replacing my B term here. I am replacing 2x with -3x and +5x. Everything else stays exactly the same. So this becomes x squared minus 3x plus 5x minus 15, and I'm ready to factor by grouping. I group my first two and my second two. Factor out the x of the first group, so that's x minus 3. Factor out the 5 from the second group, so that's x minus 3. Now these match, so it becomes x minus 3 times x plus 5. So now we know that the length must be x plus 5 and the width must be x minus 3. I put the smaller one on the smaller side. X minus 3 is going to be smaller than x plus 5 if x is positive, so I put that on the smaller side. All right, so let's try one without the rectangle. Remember, A, B, and C is what we're looking for. A is 6, B is -23, and C is 20. We want to do A times C, so that's 120, and I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to be 120 and add to be -23. Divided by 8 is 15. Ooh, here we go. 8 and 15 add together to be 23. The only problem is I want them to be -23, so they both are going to have to be negative. So I rewrite this as 6x squared minus 8x minus 15x. Remember, I'm replacing B with the magic numbers, so A and C stay the same. Remember, I want to rewrite this so that there's a plus in the middle of the two groups and put the negative on the inside. 6x squared and 8x can both be divided by 2x, so that leaves me with x minus 4, because, 3x minus 4, because 6 divided by 2 is 3, x squared divided by x is x, 8 divided by 2 is 4, we bring down the negative. I notice that the negatives are backwards here. We've got a negative in front, and this one has a positive in front, so when I factor this out, I'm going to go ahead and factor out a -5. Both of -15 and +20 can be divided by -5. -15 divided by -5 is +3. 20 divided by -5 is -4. The two sets of parentheses match, so that's my common factor, and that leaves me with 2x minus 5. Go ahead and pause the video now and try example 2 on your own. You should have started by multiplying 20 times 3 and getting 60, and then you were looking for two things that multiplied to be 60 and added to be -19. Let's see, 1 and 60 isn't going to work, 2 and 30, 3 and 20, 4 and 15 might. Yep, 4 times 15 is 60, and -4 and -15 makes -19. So you should have rewritten this as 3x squared minus 4x in the first group, plus -15x plus 20 in the second group. 3 and 4 aren't divisible by anything but 1. X squared and x are both divisible by x, so that becomes 3x minus 4. For this one, I'm going to go ahead and take out a -5, so that becomes 3x minus 4 as well. The two sets of parentheses match, so you should have gotten 3x minus 4 times x minus 5.